Hello everyone, welcome to another Grimgar video. Today I wanted to try something a little different. So I decided to go on tiermaker.com and I'm going to actually tier list the Grimgar party members. So all of How to Heroes party members. This includes some people you might not consider part of his party, like Kishi and the meat golem that dies immediately after Satoru joins their party, but I'm going to count them because it's fun to talk about these characters. So I'm going to go ahead and just count them anyway. Plus on Wikipedia, it also counts them as members as well. So, you know, I'm just going to go with it. And I thought this would be a fun little side video I can do because I'm trying to actually branch out on YouTube and try different things. I also want to eventually start trying different types of fantasy content here on YouTube as well. So expect in the future more stuff that isn't just Grimgar, but I still want to keep talking about Grimgar as well. But let's get into it. Let's start with our tier list. And if you enjoy stuff like this, like, comment, all that YouTube stuff. And let's begin. So we have D tier all the way to S tier. Very simple tier list. Not really anything crazy fancy. This tier list is going to be a spectrum. Characters whose arcs are always relevant to the story, do really cool stuff, have some kind of relationship, and have some kind of friendship with the rest of the cast in the party. And overall, characters that basically the story couldn't work without are going to score really high on this tier list. Also, there's going to be a few exceptions. If a character's just flat out very interesting in terms of writing, they're also going to score a little higher as well. And keep in mind that a lot of this is going to be mainly just my own opinion. If you guys have a different tier list, let me know in the comments down below. But let's start with D tier. D is basically characters that should have been given more to do, and they don't really have anything in the story except for, like, say, progressing other characters' development, or they just kind of, like, show up and then they're just gone. Basically the meat golem that doesn't even get a picture in the light novel, which, by the way, when I tried making this tier list, it kept cutting off his head. But realistically, he's the most nothing character, but he's essentially just there to progress Satoru's overall character development in the story, which I know a lot of people in the fandom don't think she has any development. I'll get into Satoru's overall development when I talk about her. I'm gonna actually make a whole video talking about Satoru in the future because she's more interesting than a lot of people lead on, but she is a little more subtle than everyone else. Enma. His name is Enma, the golem, the meat golem, made of a bunch of undead body parts. Enma showed up when Satoru joins the party and essentially dies to a dragon immediately as soon as he starts fighting the dragon. He just gets ripped in half, and Satoru has to carry his core, essentially, for the rest of the story. And that's really the last we get of him until he shows up in the Piranha arc, which that's significantly later on. He only really shows up as a power that Satoru has in that world. But then he just doesn't show up ever again. But he's a part of the party, so he's gonna just kind of be in D tier. They could have done a lot more with him. Maybe expanding more about, like, being a meat golem. Does he have any feelings? Does he care about Satoru at all? He kind of seems to. He protects her, but it could also be because she's his creator. I don't know. There's not enough with him to really give him anything higher than a D tier, honestly, because he just kind of dies. Next, we're gonna talk about Kuzaku. Kuzaku is the second tank that How to Heroes party gets. Kuzaku, by How to Heroes' own admission, is not the brightest person in their party. He's kind of a dumbass. But he's very much a caring and loving dumbass. He will throw himself in front of any situation to protect his party members. And his initial, like, introduction to the party, when reading it at first, I was kind of like, this is a little weird. But when you reread it and you start realizing he's kind of pretending to not be scared, because the moment he joined How to Hero's party, this dude was way out of his league. How to Hero and his party were fighting things that were, like, past his level at that point. I think that his introduction in Volume 4 was actually handled throughout the volume pretty well. It was admittedly pretty fast, but I didn't mind it because he was struggling to do anything besides blocking because he was kind of scared at first, even though he kind of didn't want to admit to being scared. Which I know it sounds kind of weird, but when How to Hero told him how he feels about being a tank in the front line, he kind of said it was fun, but then when you watch him actually fight in the front line, he kept freezing up and just only blocking, because that's the only thing How to Hero told him to do. This guy just has no idea what he's doing until Ransa comes out and rips him a new one in the middle of them having dinner, and he asks Mary for advice constantly about how to be in the front lines. He's just kind of there trying to do his best, and he eventually does develop into a much more charismatic and much more caring person throughout the story. The story does actually give him a lot to do, funny enough. At the end of Volume 4, he goes head-to-head with a giant monster that was personally one of my favorite fights in the entire light novel, And he does a pretty damn good job for somebody who's new at tanking. And he only gets better as the story goes on. I have an entire video dedicated to him if you guys want to check it out. I made it a while ago. But he starts as a scared kid to someone who's so confident that he actually gets a new power in Pirano that makes him stronger depending on how much he has self-love and confidence. And I personally do think that he's one of the more underappreciated characters in Grimgar. He's not the best, but he's pretty simple. I'd give him. He's one of my. He's my favorite character out of all the Grimgar characters. But I still have to be honest. He's definitely a B tier. I'd give him high B tier. Maybe low A tier, I guess. But like he's great for what he does. For what he brings to the table, he excels at. But he doesn't do much other than that. Next is Minato. My God. Minato is a really interesting character, and I feel like a lot of the fans in Grimgar possibly don't really realize what kind of person Minato actually is, basically, because not a lot of people actually read the bonus volumes and realize that he's actually a fucking sociopath. And I love that. Like, everyone's got their own problems in Haru's party. They all have their own different baggage. But Minato was using all of them to begin with. And he was planning on fucking just, like, eventually abandoning them and moving on to another party. He does develop some level of a conscience, I guess you can say. At some point, he does actually start to care about them. And he even planned on having Haruhiro be second in command and help him actually make decisions because he started noticing really good traits in Haruhiro. He was going to use all of them, and he specifically put himself as a healer so he wouldn't be in the front lines, even though he knew he probably could be a tank and actually be a warrior, but he thought it'd be unsafe. So he specifically became a healer to stay in the back lines. So he knows how to actually make a party composition, but he actively realized that he has to actually be in the front lines to cover for all of their absolute fucking shittiness, because Haru's party was terrible at the beginning. And he actually had to cover for them or they were all gonna die. So he had to force himself to be in the front lines to compensate for their bad tanks. It leads you to think, like, what if Minato actually was just a warrior and they got somebody else to be the healer? But no, so prideful that he saw himself as a more important person than they were early on. Hell, even Renji realized that this guy is a psychopath, but he still has skill. Enough skill that Renji actually asked him to join his party. But Minato refused because he has such pride that he doesn't want anybody else to be in charge of him. So this guy basically goes from thinking he's better than everyone else and thinking that the others are less valuable than he is, so he puts them on the front lines and stays in the back as a healer, then realizes that they're all terrible at their jobs and has to compensate. But due to the fact that he chose to be a priest healer instead of a warrior, he ends up putting himself in even more danger because he doesn't have the training for it. And because they're all so weak that he decided to spam healing to keep them all fucking motivated and to essentially make sure they don't die. And this ultimately is what got him killed, which is hilarious. And yes, also he started to care about them, and this is another reason why he started killing them like crazy. But there's just so much complexity to this character. He's such an interesting character in terms of writing. And there's just so much to it. I could talk on about this for a while, but I don't want to take up the whole video. In terms of writing and impact of the story, he's definitely also a B tier character because he doesn't do much other than just die, essentially. But because of his introduction to the story and what he brings to it, I want to put him up in higher A tier because of what he does to the story. But at the same time, he doesn't do much other than fucking die. But he's a good example of a very well-used death in a story, essentially. And then you figure out what it all meant with the bonus volume, so it gives him even more layers of complexity. But I'll give him a B tier for now. I mean, I could also give him low A tier. He's weird. Maybe I should make another tier right here, like B plus or something. Let's give him A for now, because just what he does to the story, what he does to Haruhiro and all that stuff. Like, there's so much to him. Okay. Mary.
Mommy? Sorry. Mommy? Sorry. Mommy?
I love Mary. But she starts not trusting people, and then she begins to trust people. And there's a lot more in there than just that. But I'm simplifying it a lot. But her whole arc is from volume 1 to 2, and she still does stuff through the story. Like the story doesn't struggle with her to do stuff. She's always healing. She's always helping people. She's always supporting Haru. She has interaction. She has a friendship and relationships with Shihiro and Yume. And she does have a bit of a relationship with Kuzaku as well. But that starts to kind of die after a while. And she kind of doesn't really interact with Kuzuko all that much after like volume 4 or 5. While the story does not struggle with having her do stuff, because she is always doing, she's always healing, she's always helping, like I said earlier. I feel like the writer struggles to like develop her past that, because everything about her comes back to Hadahiro and her relationship with Hadahiro, and eventually they do something very big with her when it comes to her death.
Oh, no.
And she becomes the new vessel for the No Life King, which is something that was huge, but it took so long to get there. And she does struggle with coming back to life, having new powers because she can use fucking Fireball and a bunch of other new spells that hurt her also, oddly enough. She kind of stays as a flat character arc, helping others develop around her. You're gonna notice that that's one thing. There's a lot of characters on this tier list in Hadahiro's party that help others develop, which is funny because her class is mostly focused on support. So actually, it works with her character. I'd have to give her, honestly, a tier because she has so much going on in the story, but she doesn't like change or develop. So if you're interested in like characters developing and changing past her first arc, there's not much after that. But she does so much to help progress the story that I can't put her lower because she's such a huge component to the overall story. Which is not what I can say for our next character. Moguzo! Yay! Oh my god! People are gonna hate me! I'm just gonna... Don't mind me. I'm just gonna see. He does help with Ranta's development. Again, another character that dies and helps develop other characters. But Moguzo is essentially just there to be the big tank in their party initially. This is why I still think that Kuzuku is a much better character for that role ultimately, and that's why he had to replace him. But Moguzo does a lot of fun action stuff. This man kills a shit ton of goblins in the first book, and then proceeds to kill a shit ton of kobolds in the second book. And if we're being honest, he kind of carries the team in terms of combat from the second book all the way to the third book. He also has, debatably, one of the best fights throughout the entire light novel. Him and Renji versus the giant orc in Volume 3. Which, by the way, Volume 3's giant war fight was one of the best fights in the entire light novel. Fucking awesome, honestly. But in terms of a character, he's very passive. He only gets aggressive when he's in a fighting situation. And he has a huge crush on Mary at one of the volumes. But he dies after the third volume. And there's nothing much for him to do after that except have Ranta get motivated by him. And he's essentially becomes their cook for a while. And he has, I believe in the anime, they give him more to do because he show you his hobbies. He likes carving, he loves cooking and all that stuff. And I don't remember if in the first two light novels, they had him cooking at all, actually. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I think he did. But that cooking aspect of his character wasn't really big until the bonus volume where you go into his POV. And you see how much he cares about his friends through cooking. But he doesn't do anything after that. Like, after volume 3, he's no longer really relevant to the story except to motivate Ranta later on. So he's like a worse Monato. Monato has complexity to him. Monato's got more stuff with him as a character. And he has a great fight with Renji in Volume 3 when he's fighting against the giant orc, and it's awesome. And he held his own, and it was great. But in terms of what he can bring to the story, there's not much there. And his only real big, like, moment in the story that everyone remembers who reads the light novel is essentially the third volume when he fights a giant orc. He's super useful in the third volume. He's great, but that's when he dies. But yeah, I love the guy, but we're just gonna keep him at C tier for now, unfortunately. Zodiac. All right, me putting Zodiac on this list might be a little surprising for some people. Zodiac actually is a great vehicle for foreshadowing and for symbolism in the story. Ranta summons him, and Zodiac is incredibly mean to Ranta, and he hates Ranta, and he's nice to everyone else. Ranta's internal conflict is shown through the interactions with Zodiac. Zodiac is a reflection of Ranta's inner soul. Zodiac treats Ranta like shit. Therefore, Ranta dislikes himself. Zodiac is also used to show Ranta's development as a person. The moment Ranta accepts the fact that he loves his friends and he wants to go back to them, Zodiac transforms into a badass scythe, wielding Grim Reaper thing, And this symbolizes Ranta finally ascending to a point where he's actually becoming a better person. And every time Zodiac is on screen, they give you bits and pieces of this through their interactions with him and Ranta. And it's done really well, surprisingly. He's also just a fun little jackass. He says some fucked up stuff sometimes, and I enjoy his presence. But ultimately, Zodiac is still just a spell. While I love him, he doesn't really do much else in the story past that. But again, it's one of those things where he's there to make other characters be better. So, I'm gonna put Zodiac just above Moguzu. I'm gonna put Moguzu under Zodiac. I'm sorry. There it is. Zodiac is a more impactful character to the story than Moguzu. I'm sorry. Hi, this is Editor John. I realized that I recorded about 45 minutes to maybe about 50 minutes of footage for this and audio, and I realized it's probably a bad idea to release a giant video on YouTube because it doesn't really do very well. So I'm going to keep it around 10 to 13 minutes this video. So I'll come back to you guys with a part 2 of this if you guys want it enough. Let me know in the comments button and I'll get a part 2 out of the next part of this tier list. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching this far.